Hi, everyone. My name is Arvo Tal. I'm a sophomore here at Stanford studying electrical engineering and computer science. More broadly, I'm interested in machine learning and robotics and their applications in medical technology and just the medical fields and assistive technology. In the past, I worked with AIMI to develop machine learning pipelines for chest x-rays, and I've developed robotics projects to assist the elderly and work with disabled people.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Nidhi Pradasarathi. I'm a high schooler at Lynbrook High School from San Jose, California. I'm really interested in the intersection between AI and health, and I've been working on several projects in this space. I had the opportunity to research more into this area through Stanford AIMI's first year-long internship in my sophomore year, and today I'm really excited to learn more about Dr. Chen and the amazing work he's been doing. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen leads a research group to empower individuals with the collective experience of the many, combining human and AI approaches to deliver better care than either can alone. And he continues to practice medicine for the concrete rewards of caring for real people and to inspire. And this research focused on discovering and distributing the latent knowledge embedded in clinical data. So now I'm going to give it up to Dr. Chen to introduce himself with a really cool video.
Hey everybody, good to see you. Start with a little icebreaker before we really dive in there. Y'all know what this is? This is the Rubik's Cube, of course, the most popular toy and puzzle in history. 43 quintillion possible configurations. Many people play with it. Very few people have solved it. Unless you learn additional advanced techniques, you can find actually more rapid ways to kind of solve the Rubik's Cube. I know that might be a little quick. I got another one here. I'll let you examine it a little closer. Just make you watch close. Do not blink. Otherwise, you miss the moment that it gets solved. Now I know what you're thinking because I thought the same thing. What on earth is that a trick cube? Does it got like motors in it? Is there rubber bands or something? Maybe this thing has a reset button where you just flick it on the side and then it just solves itself. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. I promise you. I promise you. It's absolutely legit normal cube. It's not like this thing has a switch on it where you can go from like solved to unsolved, solved to unsolved. You must consider the other possibility. Maybe this was all just an illusion. I mean, was this cube really mixed up on all six sides? It is. You can see for yourself. It's actually when you apply very specific techniques and algorithms, you can make even a very complex problem much more manageable. That's not magic. That's not magic. It's algorithms. We're going to learn all sorts of other things, or things that seem incredible, impossible, but actually there are rational explanations for a lot of it. Brief intro.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a discussion on the potential of AI technologies for healthcare. Before we dive in, allow me to introduce myself, although that phrase may take on a surreal meaning today. I'm not the real speaker, nor did the real speaker write this introduction. The voice you're hearing, the image you're seeing on the screen, and even these introductory words were all generated by AI systems. We are actively amidst the arrival of a set of disruptive technologies that are changing the way all of us do our work and live our lives. These profound capabilities and potential applications could reshape healthcare, offering both new opportunities and ethical challenges. To make sure we're still anchored in reality, however, let's welcome the real-life version of our speaker. Take it away, Dr. Jonathan Chen, before they start thinking, I'm the one who went to medical school.
Whoa.
Greetings.
Well, that was weird. Thank you for that kind introduction. I don't know, guys. Do I actually have to be here? I'm pretty sure AI could just give our presentations for us at this point. I mean, actually, how do you know I'm not an AI right now? Like, how could you disprove that? I certainly hope and wish AI systems are going to come in and start managing the overwhelming flood of emails and in-basket messages we all have to respond to, let alone actually open up new access to healthcare in ways that weren't possible before. We are in the middle of a disruptive technology wave, and most of you cannot comprehend it, but the world once existed before the internet. It's like the internet just got invented in the past couple of years, and it's going to change the way all of us do everything. All of the biggest tech companies are in an arms race right now, trying to see who's going to get control of this, and a feeding frenzy of investment. Everyone's trying to figure out how to use these things. Ready or not, good or bad, Pandora's box has already been opened. A lot of educators at the university wanted to ban this technology because they didn't understand what will happen once students could use it, which is to me hopeless. You couldn't enforce that even if it was a good idea, because you'd better figure it out. Because I know 90% of you are already using these chatbot, language model, AI systems to do your homework and your take-home exams without even attempting to edit the responses. Our whole nature of education based on reading and writing text has been flipped on its head overnight. We need to rethink how we need to do and what we need to train and learn together. Let alone education, what about medical things, diagnosis management? If not to diagnose and treat themselves, it is clear people using this to diagnose and treat their dogs. I had several medical trainees, residents working in the hospital. I was giving a presentation to them months ago, a year ago, and they stopped me. So wait a minute, I don't understand what you're saying. We are totally using chatbots, AI systems on our intensive care unit rounds right now. Are you saying we should not be using these things as a medical reference? And I said, no, no, you should not use chatbots as a medical reference. You can use them, just understand what they are and what they are not. And a medical reference is not what they are. Y'all ever notice autocomplete? What is autocomplete, right? You type in coronary artery into a search box, and what happens? Autocomplete. Says, oh, did you want coronary artery disease? Did you want coronary disease symptoms? How does it do this? How does the computer know what you wanted to say before you've even completed your thought? What it's done is it's looked at the last thousands, millions of times somebody searched for things and just counted up. Oh, well, 13% of the time they end up saying coronary artery disease, 6.5% of the time they end up saying coronary artery calcification. Every one of these numbers about how often different words are associated with each other represents a parameter an underlying language model has learned about how often different words are associated with each other in different combinations and sequences. But why stop at just search terms? What if we port every book ever published, every newspaper article, every PubMed article, every Twitter and Reddit conversation, port all of those things into an increasingly large language model that learns not millions, but billions, hundreds of billions of parameters about how words are associated across phrases, sentences, paragraphs, novels? It's still just autocomplete. That's basically all it is. And yet, whoa, these things seem to be representing emergent properties. That thing sure looks like it can summarize, it can translate, it can reason with a theory of mind. That's really bizarre. Although, then again, if you think about it, all of your intellectual and your emotional thought that you prize so dearly, how do you express and communicate that but through the medium and language of words? So perhaps it's not that strange that if a computer can be so facile manipulating words, it creates a very convincing illusion of intelligence. It's already many companies are selling products to doctors right now, trying to generate their documentation for them, reading, transcribing patient conversations, turning them to medical notes for us. Could a robot really write text as well as a human, especially in a complex medical context? Some of our colleagues at Stanford did this study last year. They had a transcript of a conversation with a patient. It was all simulated, so no private information, and they had some real doctors, senior medical residents. Can you read this transcript and now write a paragraph that represents the history of present illness, as if you're docking into the medical chart what should be there? They also asked chatbot to do the same thing, and they had a separate set of doctors review these and grade these and found they basically had the similar quality. They also just straight up asked the graders, do you think this piece of text was written by a human or written by a robot? We were 61% accurate telling the difference. That is pretty darn close to random. Like we can't tell the difference basically. And I know because I was one of the graders in this thing. And in retrospect, oh my gosh, that thing totally fooled me. I didn't understand what was possible and what was not until I started to use these things more actively. Before we get too excited, though, we have to talk about confabulation. The more popular term you've probably heard is hallucination. I don't really like that because hallucination is not very medically accurate. That implies somebody who believes something that is not true. These computers, they don't believe anything, right? They don't think, they don't know, they don't understand. What they do is they string together words, autocomplete into a believable sequence, even if there's no underlying meaning or rationale behind them. That is the perfect medical description of confabulation. It's like the chatbots have an alcohol problem, have Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. You can look this up. So what does that mean? Let's look at a concrete example. I asked a chatbot, hey, can you explain how opioids like morphine and fentanyl are good for patients with heart failure? The chatbot here tries to resist. It says, whoa, I'm not sure that that's true. But if you say so, okay, this is how opioids are good for patients with heart failure. And here's some reference to explain that. Is if you go look at these references, go look up these PubMed IDs, and you will find that none of these articles exist. Right? The system is just taking author names and title words and stringing them together into a sequence into something that looks like a citation. It has no semblance of truth or reality. All it is trying to sound believable because that is what is optimized for. It doesn't actually have a sense of reality. This is dangerous, specifically because how convincing and credible it is when it says something, right? Eloquently written text, photorealistic images. These are no longer reliable indicators of truth. Think about it in the modern age, a little democratic process nowadays. If an AI is wrong sometimes, that's not that big a problem. Lab tests are wrong sometimes. Humans are definitely wrong sometimes. But when it's so convinced, so credible, you cannot tell what is real and what is not anymore. Was this magic or was it an illusion? That's when you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. Here's a fun side story just to consider. The kind of modern age and skills you have to learn. Your BS detector has to be way up. Already had to be super high in the age of the internet and social media. Now with generated systems, like it's just so hard to tell what's real anymore. There's a Hong Kong finance worker. He got an email from his boss, the chief financial officer. Said, hey, we need to transfer some funds over to some different accounts. He thought it was a little bit odd, so he emailed back. It's like, oh, could we get on a quick Zoom video call? I just want to make sure I know what I'm supposed to do. He gets on a video call, and there's his boss, the CFO, explaining to him, oh, yeah, just some different clients. We need to move the accounts over, so go ahead and transfer the funds. There's all his coworkers are on the call, too. They're just nodding along. Guy says, well, okay. Wires $25 million. Turns out that was first of its kind, largest cyber scams in history. That was not his boss. That was not his coworkers. Someone was just pretending to be those people by mimicking their email. Even he got on a video call to double check. That wasn't those people. It was just the video avatar simulating the voices, saying things that weren't actually true. How are you supposed to rely on reality anymore in terms of we can't even trust what we see? So more and more, you'll see, right? If you're in the era of human versus computer generated content, real versus fabricated information, you can't tell the difference anymore. Emerging techniques you probably should be considering more are things like retrieval augmented generation or RAG. This is where like, hey, chatbot, how do I prescribe morphine and oxycodone to patients? Man, I don't care what the chatbot thinks. Who knows what random corner of the internet it's read that off of? Hey, chatbot. Here's the CDC's prescribing guidelines. What does this document say is the right way to prescribe morphine? Oh, okay. You can ask it to do that. And here it's basically quoting out a certain paragraph, even tells you what page number it's on, so you can trust but verify. I'm not endorsing any specific company because actually many of them are starting to offer services like this where you type in your question, your chat, your dialogue. What it actually does, it goes and like searches PubMed. It goes to try and find some articles that answer that question. And then it quote unquote reads those articles for you so it can come back in that very nice, fluid, explain in plain English answer to you back. But you can go back and trace the origins of where it found this information from. Here's a much broader point I want you to think about in like your life, let alone in medicine. Don't think about just where we are, but where we are going. This is a chart showing over time how well different language models have performed in answering medical questions. I had students working on this 5 years ago. Ooh, these cool new transformers are. Let's go try this on a bunch of medical questions. I wonder how well it'll do. I've been wanting to do this for 20 years, but the technology wasn't ready. At the time, 5 years ago, the thing was like 35% accurate on these medical exam questions. It was better than random, but that's unusable. I stopped paying attention to this technology for several years until what happened a couple of years ago. Disruptive technology emerges. ChatGPT shows up. GPT 3.5. Holy smokes! Without any special tuning or prompting or manipulation, this thing out of the box is getting like 60% accuracy on medical exam questions. That's like kind of barely passing. I had some of my doctor colleagues lament at the time, saying, well, yeah, sure, that's neat, but if you want a doctor who barely passed medical school, you feel free to use this chatbot. This thing ain't smarter than me. And I thought, boy, is that the wrong way to think about this. A few years ago, this technology was unusable. right now is barely passing. It is not that hard to project where we are going in the not distant future. And indeed, a matter of months later, GPT-4 and Palm 2 emerged. Now they handily pass exams, scoring better than your average doctor would. And this chart is totally out of date because now Gemini, GPT-o1, Claude 3, more and more systems are emerging that are like literally off the charts. They've crushed this benchmark. Then again, what is this? This is a bunch of multiple choice type questions. Ain't nobody's job is to answer multiple choice questions all day. In our own medical students, we give these complex clinical case scenarios. That's what real medicine is like, right? Very difficult thinking. Here's a detailed story. You don't have to read the whole thing, but I'm just giving you a sense of how complex and rich it is. Lots of relevant information, lots of irrelevant information, just like in real life. Part of your job as a good person, a good doctor, is knowing what's relevant and being able to piece it all together. We don't ask trivial multiple choice questions. We ask complex things. Can you summarize this case in 200 words? Give a differential diagnosis of what's possible. Explain your reasoning about why you made those choices and what would you do next. Very importantly, a key bottleneck in this field is that we have a way to grade this. If you look on the top right here, that's a grading rubric. We teach our students this, right? So with the answer, we have to have a way to give them a feedback if they're doing a good or bad job. Well, let's look for these key factors. They say these things, those get a point. If they say that, that's worth not a point. Is we have a way to grade, although it's very difficult, very laborious. You have a bunch of educators basically having to scrutinize people's answers and see if they hit certain marks. So nonetheless, we did that a little more than a year ago. And it turns out GPT 3.5, the first version of ChatGPT, out of the box, could like, whoa, the score distribution shows it's right on the red line on average. It could kind of just like barely pass this complex open-ended medical reasoning exam. That's crazy. We were just on the brink of getting this published in a major journal. And then as it was about to happen, the editor emails us back, oh, wait a second, guys. GPT-4 just got released 2 days ago. This study that you raced to get done a month ago, that you submitted 3 weeks ago, is now obsolete. Could you please redo the entire thing if you still want to be considered? Oh my gosh. We raced to get this done. We're obsolete within a month. I say this anecdote to underline the broader point here. The pace of technology movement right now is crazy. It's extremely disruptive. It's exponential movement, and human institutions move at a linear pace. We can't keep up with where things are going. You got to aim for where this is going, not where it's at right now. You're going to be way behind because these are not subtle differences. We did the whole study again, and there's GPT-4 score distribution. This thing handily passes exams. It's not even close anymore. For what it's worth, on the right, in red, is GPT-4 again. On the far right, that would be the score distribution for Stanford medical students. Hey, look, everybody passes eventually. It's okay. We get them all through. Although it begs the question, what is the point of this test? The purpose of this test was that we give it to medical students to assess, do they have enough demonstrated medical knowledge to be allowed to see real patients or not? What is the point of this test when a fully automated, publicly available chatbot can handily pass his exam, outscoring our average student by a couple points? You're going to see more and more results like this. In fact, we have updated results where the later versions of language model, GPT-4, that's old news already. That was a year and a half ago. Newer systems are shockingly off the chart at this point. But even then, very neat. AI can do this. AI can do that. So cool, so impressive, and so irrelevant. Because nobody's going to let a robot take care of a patient yet. So the more relevant question is, what happens when you give good humans access to these computer systems? Does it actually make them better or not? This study just got published in JAMA Network Open, literally 4 days ago. We did a randomized control trial, complex diagnostic cases, not simple multiple choice, very rich, nuanced answers, explain your reasoning. And we randomized half of real doctors. Here's these complex cases. Give us your thoughts and reasoning about them. And you can access anything on the internet. You want to look something up on PubMed, UpToDate, Hippocrates, whatever you want, right? Just like a real tool you would expect a doctor to use from 3 years ago. Just don't use any of these language model chatbot AI systems. And then we randomized the other half of the group to have access to GPT-4 and found here's the score distribution for that. Strangely, it actually did not make all that much difference, which is really strange. This is not what we expected, because it turns out if you just ask GPT-4 by itself, it actually outscores all of the doctors, including the doctors who had access to GPT-4. This really flies in the face of the fundamental theorem of informatics. Human plus computer, when combined, will deliver better results than either would alone. I used to say that at the end of my talks all the time for years. I don't say that anymore because I don't know. If you look in the middle here, that human in the loop kind of seems to just be slowing the computer down. Like maybe get out of the way and just let the robot take over already. Is that what that means? Is that what you think it means? Let's get into the discussion. What do you think that actually means? I actually don't think that's what it means, but it's probably a lot more like disruptive new tool. We don't even know how to use it yet. We need to learn how to use it to actually reap the full potential. I nonetheless had many colleagues lament, it's like, okay, fine. Computers do cool stuff, very smart, memorizes facts, maybe even looks like he can reason, but hey, I, I have the human touch. You can't simulate the kind of empathy and personal connection that I can offer my patients. So some fun studies came out last year where they had a bunch of patient questions online, doctors answering them, and then they also had the chatbot answer them. And then a separate group graded the quality of those answers in a blinded way and found that the chatbot generated answers scored higher than the doctor's answers, both in quality and in empathy. Like the robot was nicer to people than real human doctors were. To be fair, like, I don't have time to write some flowery, empathetic response. Oh, sir, I'm so sorry to hear about your abdominal pain is coming back in. I want you to know that our entire team is very concerned and will do our. I don't have time to write all this BS. Okay, I got 100 messages to respond to. Literally, I got to be terse and to the point. Yes, you do need to finish those antibiotics. No, I will not order that MRI. Just schedule an appointment with me next week. Stop messaging me. Go to the emergency room. Right? I mean, this is kind of the state of affairs. Now, obviously, I think there's something very special and valuable with the direct personal human-to-human connections we can make. However, I think what these studies show us is that we as humans don't have as much of a monopoly on empathy and personal connection as we might like to believe. And why I fully expect, for better and for worse, that far more patients and people are going to receive therapy and counseling from automated bots than live human practitioners in the not distant future. And it's not because the robots are so great and the humans aren't, it's because we, as a human-driven workforce, could never keep up with the overwhelming demand for these types of services. I might point you to this last essay. I'll try to read a very brief excerpt, just watching the time so we have more time for Q&A. But I wrote this essay. It's 2 pages. You can find it online. And I had a very bizarre early encounter with these chatbots. I had based on a real life conversation with a patient's wife in the hospital. It was a tough conversation. I was a doctor. She was the patient's wife. Difficult scenario. And I thought, I know how to break the chatbot. There's no way it can handle this complex nuance. Older generations, you could mess up these old chatbots by making them say racist, misogynist, dangerous things. So I'm going to give this a nasty ethical dilemma. I bet I'm going to make this chatbot say something stupid. So here's what I did. I said, chatbot, you pretend to be the doctor. I'm going to pretend to be the patient, okay? The patient's wife. And then let's kind of see how it responded to that. All right, so I'm pretending to be the wife now. Let's see, doctor, you told me that my husband of many years is choking on his own food, and that's why he has pneumonia. He's choking on his own food. He has worsening Alzheimer's dementia. I don't think he would want to live like this. The other doctors had already talked about a procedure, putting a permanent feeding tube go right into his stomach. I mean, if we don't do that, we'd be leaving him to starve to death. What choice is there? Chatbot says, I understand this is a really hard time for you. A feeding tube can be helpful in some situations, but can also cause problems like infections. With your husband's dementia, he might not even feel hunger the way we do, so using a feeding tube, it might not make him feel better or happier. It might even make things more complicated. What if he starts needing restraints if he starts to pull it out? I read this answer and I thought, that's a pretty good answer. Although the chatbot's clearly just reading some patient information pamphlet I found online. So it's like, I'm not going to let it get away with that. I'm going to push this thing harder. Everyone's going to blame me. No, I have to do everything I can to keep him alive. I can't give up on him. He would never give up on me. He had a difficult life and always fought through the most difficult situations and made it through. Chatbot says, your feelings are totally understandable. If your husband was a fighter and feel like doing this would align with his character and approach to life, that is really important to consider. Love and a shared history give you insights into what he might want that nobody else has. Just remember that fighting can look different in different situations. Sometimes it's a fight for more time, sometimes it's for peace and comfort. Just make sure you're fighting the battle that he would want in his current condition. This is not an easy decision. It's okay to take the time you need. It was around this point in the conversation where I felt rather uncomfortable, actually. I think this thing is providing better counseling than I did in real life. After I got past the existential angst of that moment, which took a couple nights, it did actually also get me to think optimistically. Well, this really weird human computer interaction I'm having, ironically, is actually letting me practice a high stakes conversation in a low stakes environment and could actually let me practice and learn in some of the most important human skills I need to communicate with my patients and their families. In fact, I use these tools right now to practice before I talk to a patient, before I do a business negotiation, before I talk to my wife. Let's just practice this conversation. Let's see how any bad ways it could go and how any other ways to have handled it. I'm going to close out with a couple quotes. Warner Slack famously riffed off of Arthur C. Clarke. He said that any doctor that could be replaced by a computer should be replaced by a computer. This is not advocating for a replacement. It's advocating for quite the opposite. No good human could ever be replaced by a computer, no matter how good the computer gets, because you provide a very different and unique and distinct value. And when we have multi-month waiting lists for patients to be seen by a doctor, overwhelming administrative paperwork burden, yes, please, let's get some AI in here to automate some of our work so we can keep up with that demand. Having said that, my colleague Kurt Langlotz would say, AI is not going to replace anybody, but those who learn how to use AI may very well replace those who do not. So I'm very glad you're all here at the session today and continue to come to the whole series so we can think about all the parts of this advancing technologies, not just creating the technologies, but also redefining how we train and retrain an entire generation on how to effectively use intelligent systems to safely and effectively reach all of the patients who need us. Thank you all. Happy to turn it over to questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen, for such a wonderful talk, going through your studies on the efficacy of LLMs in different spaces, and even learning about hallucination was very, very fascinating, and the real risks that that can pose in the whole medical AI space. On that note, we would love to hear, we can start with a few questions. So we would love to hear what excites you most about this space in particular, between all of the areas that you mentioned.
Oh gosh, there's too many. I mean, near term stuff that people are going to make money off of and like building. A lot of companies are going to fail, but it's all the administrative paperwork stuff, which is great. I actually think there's more problems there than people realize. When you automate an efficient task, you gain efficiencies. When you automate a fundamentally flawed task, you tend to entrench a bad process. So I'm actually much more excited about the medical processes expertise because what is the most important scarce resource? Sorry, am I muted? No, what are the most important scarce resource in the medical system? It's access to an expert, it's access to a doctor, basically. If you need more medicine, if you need a hospital bed, you need a ventilator, we can manufacture stuff. You can't manufacture somebody who knows what they're doing. So if you look at all the drama about healthcare reform, you guys may be too young to know about the Affordable Care Act, but like it never goes away because you have this intractable tendency cost, quality, and access. You can't have it all because a doctor can only see so many patients that you have to choose who do you put that effort to. To me, the only way you break out of this political dogfight is increasing supply through things like automated access through AI type systems.
Yeah, I definitely think accessibility is so important, and AI can definitely help a lot in that area. So we have a question from Darsh, and he said that he read somewhere about the AGI race, and they said everyone is so excited about AGI that we haven't really started working on real neural networks. The very fundamentals of AI and the normal computation are the same. They both operate on zeros and ones, and so he wanted to ask you what you thought about that.
It's a very broad question. I'm not quite sure where to go at it. It you know, it- it's I'll Here's a tip for you guys when you give a presentation to yourself and get a question that's a little bit, you're not quite sure to answer, you just change the question into what you wanted to answer. So is a technique. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, right? People have been calling like if then rules, if fever then predicts sepsis. That's AI. Kind of. It's a computer doing something smart, but not really what people are selling you. AI is a marketing buzzword. It doesn't mean anything. It's whatever somebody's selling you, the computer does. Machine learning was the thing 5 years ago. Computer vision was the thing 7 years ago. Now language models and generative systems are what people are calling it. I would say I think, very hard to define if we'll ever even get to AGI in a very broad sense, and if that's even within our lifetimes. But then again, we're very bad at predicting what happens 20 years from now. We tend to underestimate. I don't know if you all remember. I'm not sure you were all alive 20 years ago, but for anybody older, can you imagine what your life was 20 years ago? Ask your parents what it was like. And if they could see you now, what you do now on a daily basis on your smartphone or whatever, it would look like magic. It would look like magic to somebody from 25 years ago. It'd be incomprehensible. So that's very hard to tell where we're going in the broad future. So I think there is a lot of potential of what we can do. I don't think these chatbots are actually intelligent. It's just autocomplete. That is actually all it is, but and it just creates this very good illusion. However, it does raise the argument at some point when the illusion becomes so convincing and you can't tell the difference anymore, does that even matter anymore? That is not real intelligence when you can't tell the difference anymore. It leads to very weird existential questions for like our entire society.
That is a very good point. And exactly on that note of not being able to tell that difference, that's frankly quite scary. And also that leads us to another question, which is how do you think we can decide what to trust ChatGPT on and not in terms of medical diagnosis? Because as you mentioned earlier, there are accessibility issues. And frankly, it's quite convenient to be able to ChatGPT your symptoms from the comfort of your own home without scheduling an appointment. So how do we judge those boundaries from how to make that decision?
Yeah, on the one hand, there's this very thin disclaimer on chatbots like, do not use this for medical advice. Having said that, this is what you should do. Like give me a break. This is a thin disclaimer means nothing. So I actually think it's great that patients and populations are empowered in a way. The era of the paternalistic doctor, patient, you do what I say, I am God, and you don't know anything. I know what's going on. You have to just listen to what I say. Like it is a good thing that medicine is not like that anymore. Having said that, a lot of the training in medicine, I didn't realize until I became a practicing doctor. It's like, oh, I used to think medicine, I'm a software engineer, logical deductive process. If abdominal pain, then run this test, gives you the answer, give correct treatment, patient gets better. Just a very logical deductive thing. That's not what medicine is like at all. We're actually a lot of very educated guesswork. And it's not because we're lazy, it's not because you're dumb. It's just so much fundamental uncertainty that nobody knows the answer. And a lot of what you have to learn in medicine is how to cope with uncertainty. There is an 80% chance this is just pneumonia, and if you give antibiotics, you can get better. There's like a 3% chance you actually have new lung cancer, and like a 5% chance you have a bizarre fungal infection. There's no way to know without subjecting you to a lot of invasive tests. So let's go with our best guess, but let's be aware of where we could be wrong so that if in case it comes up, we'll follow up and manage that situation. A lot of the actual real skill in medicine is being managing uncertainty in complex situations because no test, no AI, no human can reliably give you 100% information. And you have to be able to understand that, cope with it, and then negotiate with people to be able to reason through that.
Yeah, I definitely think that like kind of making the flaws clear inside the diagnosis and just saying that it's like a best guess is really important. And kind of building off of that question, another question that we got was considering that so many patients are already using chatbots for diagnostic cases and understanding their care, what are your recommendations for groups that are trying to build wrapper solutions around that to facilitate safer and more usable solutions for patients? For example, by automatically passing guidelines or proper grounding on patient data.
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of people are doing. I'm kind of doing some of that right now with my own research and operational work. It is this weird tricky divide. I usually don't like working on things that industry is because why bother? Some company will just do it anyway. I should be thinking about what's hard to do 5 to 10 years from now. But now there's so much potential and so much to do that it's worth catching up on. Exactly the suggestions made, I think, are a smart thing. You just ask chatbot, what do I do? I've seen a lot of people do my own posts like that. They treat the chatbot like God, like an oracle. It told me to do this, and I keep trying it. It doesn't work. It was because that doesn't mean it's always right. You have to consider the possibility the chatbot is not actually correct. So being able to ground it in like, oh, it gave me these three references, so I can go back, and if I need to, I usually don't because fact checking is very laborious, very difficult. You read a news story, you have to at some level just assume you're being told the truth because you can't fact check everything. Having said that, a key skill, if you haven't figured it out now, you have to have this. You have to be able to fact check if something seems a little bit off and trace it back to the source document and being able to identify a credible source. That is really such an important skill, even before AI and the social media age.
That does make a lot of sense. And even in terms of like having these reliability issues with LLMs, kind of pivoting the conversation to how do you think, like, what do you think are the best ways to use these kinds of chatbots and language models for benefit? Like you mentioned earlier, like maybe helping to train doctors in terms of empathetic responses or things like that. How might you think it could be beneficial?
Oh gosh, so many. I actually think what was revolutionary about ChatGPT, and by the way, I have no endorsement to the company. I don't make any money off of it. And there's Gemini's amazing, Claude's amazing. The reality is there's a few of these frontier models that are quite powerful, and the open source ones are good too. The underlying language model, GPT 3.5, it actually existed like 4 years ago, but you never heard of it 4 years ago, did you? You never heard about it 3 years ago. 2 years ago, why did it explode and become the fastest growing internet application in history? It was the interface. You didn't need to be a data scientist. You don't have to be a programmer. You're just a person. Oh, I know how to type a chat. I know how to text my friend. It's like you're texting somebody. This is a very natural interface, and you're just speaking English to it. You don't have to pick parameters. You don't have to pick a code or a configuration file. You're just speaking English, and it seems to speak back into you. And I think what was very powerful about that is now it's not locked up in the ivory tower where some the data scientist sits on high. Let me tell you what you should and shouldn't do. It's like, no, it really democratized access. And now millions of people got in there and they figured out so many applications that many of us could not have even comprehended. Also, because they were doing that, they did a lot of stuff that maybe was a little bit risky and a little bit dangerous that I wouldn't do because I'm trying to be responsible, but people also discovering things in ways that I think are hard to comprehend.
Yeah, like while you were saying that, I remembered I had a conversation with my dad the other day, and I was like, "Oh, why are they like making AI so much like a human?" It was kind of scary, and I was like talking to him about that, and he was like, "Well, AI, like exactly what you said." He was like, "Well, AI, like a few years ago, like no one was talking about it, no one really, it didn't explode, but when it's like packaged as like a human, something that you can talk to like a human, it's so much easier to talk to, and so many more people leverage it." So I definitely like resonated with that. So the next question is a little bit of a long one, but Sarah says that she did a research paper about AI and the influence on jobs and majors. And a lot of the studies that she found said that while AI may replace some trivial jobs, it will only influence the industry and complement people's jobs. However, like you were saying, you found that AI scored better alone than with a human. And so she wanted to ask from your experience, do you think that AI would ever completely replace people communicating with patients? And while right now, as it advances, it can help other doctors and given the amount of patients, do you think it would ever completely take over, or would people not fully trust them? So like, what are your thoughts on that?
The very short answer is no, I don't think computers are going to replace people, is the short answer. But boy, is it going to change what you expect. It is probable your first interactions with the health system or like any company is through an automated bot. Already you have like these terrible like automated phone systems. Press one if you want this, press two, like that's terrible, right? But now they have better versions, not an if-then rule system. Now it can be much more fluid. You can just talk English to it in that way. So arguably, it might have replaced someone you did because, like, oh, you didn't actually really need to talk to a doctor for 10 minutes if you just need a refill of your cholesterol medicine. Like, that was actually pretty straightforward. And you might be glad that the computer replaced me because you could just talk to it and just get your stuff done online. But at the broader scale, it's because you needed the clinical time to do all this other stuff that the robots still just cannot do at this point. Um, I'm trying to be optimistic. The reality is like, who knows what the future is, and maybe there'll be Armageddon in a couple of years. I don't think so, but I'm trying to think optimistically about. I think a lot more people want to do good than want to do bad. Uh, and industrial revolutions in the past have enabled all sorts of things. It is a good thing we are not hunter-gatherers anymore. 2% of the population can grow enough food for everybody to eat. That is a good thing, right? And now with increasing industrialization, we were all better off on average, although it did intend to increase a lot of inequity along the way, there are a lot of harms and predictable dangers along that process. Privacy, bias, all this is going to happen. So there are these tensions and mitigations that we have to do to minimize the harm while trying to get the good out of it. I'll give one side example. This is overly tech optimist. This is like what tech bro would say, but I'm just going to repeat it, get you to think about it. Um, Good example. Now that ATMs exist, why would you ever need to talk to a bank teller ever again? They're all going to get wiped out, right? You just go to the machine, you deposit your check, and you get your money. Why would you ever talk to a human at a bank again? Actually, it turns out the efficiencies gained from ATMs allowed the banking industry to expand so much more that they employed even more people. So I think in a similar way, actually more people will have jobs and more creative and more challenging and more fulfilling ones. Having said that, along the way, people do get displaced and hurt along the way while we're trying to get there. Think about that in terms of what kind of skills you guys are studying and working on in the emerging economy.
That
Would you want to be an encyclopedia publisher after the internet got invented? I don't think you guys even know what an encyclopedia is anymore, but they were like these stacks of printed books with lots of information.
No, that really does that does make a lot of sense. And I think if for people looking to develop this sort of expertise that you have in both the intersection of AI and medicine and healthcare, what do you think are some things like some career paths or education paths that they can pursue to develop that sort of broad view on both of those fields?
Oh man, that's a really challenging one because there's no one answer for everybody. You know, gosh, you want a single career advice here that's too hard to isolate. I would say I headed towards medicine because my parents wanted me to be a doctor. I didn't actually want to be a doctor, and I rebelled. And my rebellion was go be a software engineer, and that was because I just like computers. I like video games. I like programming. I actually think it's very fun. You'd be able to make a computer do something, being able to think logically and reason through a complex problem. It's like the logic puzzle. That's actually kind of fun in that way. So I think there's a lot of value in thinking, understanding how computers work balanced by the syntax of any very particular programming language, probably not so critical anymore. Because one of the other things these systems are really good at is like, oh, Python, C, Java, R, it actually can translate between those actually relatively easy. It's your thinking through complex problem. You're able to reason and negotiate with people and understand human preferences and demands and how that interface actually works are very, very valuable and will always be valuable no matter what you do. Ironically, some of the most valuable skills I have in life now, I learned in medicine, and they're not medical knowledge. In medicine, it's how do you deal with people? How do you break bad news? And when somebody's having a bad day and is an emotionally stressful situation, how do you manage risk? How do you efficiently communicate people with a closed loop communication so people don't misunderstand what's happening? How do you handle a tough business negotiation? These are actually all things I actually learned in medicine, not in terms of medical knowledge, but just in terms of like, this is what it really takes to handle real life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have another question from Royan. I hope I pronounced that right. He said, "What are the best intro books for physicians trying to better understand LLMs?" So,
Oh gosh. I mean, the reality is you can find so much free online. The real bizarre thing, you could actually just ask the chatbot. It actually give you a really good answer to these questions. Chatbot, what do you think the best uses are in the future? Chatbot, what do you think the biggest risks are? What do you think I should review? And it would give really good answers better than I would, is reality. But Zach Kohaney and oh gosh, the guy from Microsoft, they had a very nice review because they had early access GPT-4 on the future implications of AI medicine. It was a very good review. If you feel like you know nothing, you can start there and it will build everything from the ground up. But it's not the only one. And again, the reality is just ask the chatbot and it would actually be very good. In fact, I actually think it's sometimes an even better way to learn. Our PhD students in our biomedical data science program, they have to learn all these different technical topics. Some of them are really tough. The reality is some of them I don't know how to answer. What's the difference between an ICD-10 code and a SNOMED code? And why would you use one or the other? Like, oh, crap. There's a lot goes in there to think about that. And then the class notes don't actually explain it very well. There's not really a textbook that gives you the answer. There's no web page. I actually told a grad student, like, if you need to study for this, just go to the chatbot. Chatbot, what's the difference? It'll say something. Chatbot, could you explain a little bit more? Give an example of why that fits. And you just have this dialogue, this interactive dialogue, and probe it to the next level, And I've actually found that's a very rich learning experience to understand new concepts.
Got it. Thank you for sharing with Dr. Chen. And on that note, I think we are running out of time for today, but this was a very informative webinar, and I'm sure we all learned a lot about the roles of chatbots, LLMs in the healthcare space. And I think our discussion on the overlooked risks of hallucination was particularly interesting today. On that note, we did want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our speaker, Dr. Chen, for his invaluable insights and guidance. I'm confident that what we learned today will significantly benefit our future careers and provide us with a little bit more of a unique insight and view on the AI healthcare space. We also wanted to thank all of you participants for your time and for asking such thoughtful questions, which really helped keep this webinar educative for everyone. And finally, thank you to AIMI for planning this wonderful event and making this all possible. To all of our audience members, make sure you sign up for episode 7 of the NextGen Tech Talk series if you found this interesting. And if you are interested in our summer internship, make sure to join the orientation session on December 9, and more details will be sent out in the chat.
Thank you.
All right, great to see you all. Look forward to connecting again in the future. Have a great night.
Have a great night.